Guys, you ever really think about, like, honestly think about, why we do the things we do? Like if I think about, like, my grandparents, say on my parents on my mom's side, it doesn't matter. But if I think about one of the set of grandparents I have, right, and what they've done, you know, and then what they've taught or pushed my parents, one of the set of, one of my parents to do, and then what my parents, taught me and my sister, or pushed me and my sister to do or not to do, right? Because teaching can invoke, like, like an opposite response to things, right? So if I think about stuff, like, why do we do the things we do? You know, I I sit back, and yes, I go into a rabbit hole sometimes, but I sit back, guys, and I'm like, even though these are learned behaviors, and even though, right, systematically, just because these are people in my life, these are elders, people of guardianship, I ascertain a certain thing, my sister ascertained a certain thing, like, we learn to do things and learn not to do things, right? But what is the sole reason of why we're doing stuff? For example, and, if you're not in an open-minded headspace, this may not make sense to you guys, but I think about why people have kids. I think about, why did my parents have us, right? Like, why did my grandparents have my parents, right? What was the reason behind it? Not how it happened, but, like, is it from a legacy standpoint? Is it whether there's kind of weight behind it? Or was it just something just natural to do, a natural response of kinship, relationship? Like, why am I wanting to bring kids into a world that, evokes, like, so much animosity, strife, struggle? Because life is beautiful, but you gotta go through so much, and only certain people can go through so much. So why do us as parents, because now I have kids, why do we have this notion that our kids can go through it too? Maybe it's the confidence in us being parents, right? Or maybe it's just tradition. That's one example, right? Like, why do we just go through the motions with, okay, we have to go to school in a setting to where, like, all right, we're doing this for 6, 7, 8 hours a day. We're doing this 4 to 5 days a week, for 10 to 15 years, depending on when you start school, depending if you go to higher education, like, why are we always putting ourselves, right? The kids, the parents, the grandparents, like, everybody who's lived, right, in that growing phase, and in that, phase of basically systematic education. Why do we go through those things where we're not sure if it's going to elicit a certain response, right? Or we're not sure if it's going to, allow us to really mature or grow economically, grow financially, grow, in a social manner, grow with certain mannerisms and etiquette. Like, we're doing things, one, because we're human, and it's just our we put our best foot forward. People with the purest intentions will put their best foot forward and think this is right. But, like, why do we do certain things, if most of what we do brings so much stress, strife, struggle, and uncertainty? And maybe it's just part of life. So that's the kind of thing we just do. It's just part of life, But it's like, if that's all I thought about, this is part of life, then there wouldn't really be any growth. And with growth comes, risk. With growth comes taking a chance to do something. Taking a chance to be uncomfortable for a day, a week, a month, a year or even a decade, right? You know, I look forward to me being in my 40s and 50s. A lot of people don't look forward to being old, right? People get surgery, people try to dress young, people try to stay hip. I look forward to being old because it comes with maturity, right? It comes with experience in life, you know. As I get older, I should be more experienced in life to be able to help other people, to be able to help my kids more directly, right? Help people in my family, even if it's a, you know, words of encouragement, motivation, just pointing people in a direction to look. But for me, I know that as I get older, things are being accomplished. I'm taking risks. I'm going through challenges and being uncomfortable to get certain things done, right? I want to be able to grow into a less is more reality, right? Less attachments means more freedom. Less attachments mean more flexibility. As I get older, my kids don't have to stay with me because I put them in a situation to where they could somewhat live independent. As I get older, I can focus more on my health because I put myself and my wife and my family in a situation to where we're not eating like crazy chemicalized food, and we're in a culture, or we're in different cultures, different aesthetics, different environments where we can walk more, right? Where we could use our body as a machine that it was built for, right? You know, I want to be able to I can't wait to get older because I can grow in economics. I can grow in, virtual and digital opportunities to sustain myself, to self-sustain my family, So I just think about these things, guys. Like, I can't wait to get older because I could experience more cultures. I could pick up different phrases, different words, different languages, right? Because I'm putting myself out there to do what is not traditional, And what's crazy is, what's really crazy, guys, is like, you're not gonna really know, unless you're not in it. So for us, taking a vacation, and not a vacation to go clubbing, and not a vacation to just go, across to the next city or go to the next state, but leaving home, leaving the tradition of environment, what we're used to, even for a couple days or a couple weeks, can change the mind. Like, wow, people are different out here. Like, wow, like people are doing things differently out here, And obviously that led us to want to just kind of move indefinitely, outside of our traditional environment, outside of being in the States. People tend to get stuck. They see that life, starts to move kind of faster than what they expected. They see certain things not being done. Yet people are stuck in tradition, right? People are stuck in a systematic way of thinking, a mundane way of thinking, that if I just pull through doing the same thing for 4 or 5 more years, then maybe this will happen. But sometimes getting to your goal requires change. It requires reformation. It requires distance and or isolation, to change, to get to a certain point of life. Even if that certain point of life isn't nirvana, to get just to that next step requires change. If I think of America and the American dream, there are people till this day where I could look at their finances, their credit history, and I'm no expert, I'm no nothing, and I know they can't buy a home. I know they will never be able to buy a home, yet they feel like they can still buy a home, and they can. They may not be able to buy the home in the city they're in, the state they're in, or the country, but they can buy a home in 200 other countries, territories, etc., possibly for cheaper than what they're looking for, right? But things have to change. Okay, they may have to get a remote job, right? They may have to find out how to retire early. They may have to find out to start, some sort of business to where it can cater to them living abroad, being overseas, to now get their first home, their starter home, or investment property. People want to start investing. Like, things can happen if change is implemented. You know what I'm saying? Like, my wife, myself, obviously, right? We have conversations, obviously till this day, but just being in it, like, very, very Americanized in the way of, we do this, we do that, we do this, we start it all over, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, the same things are happening every second of the day, every day of the week, every week of the year, guys. And yet, I see more lapse in getting to where people need to be. Why are people still working, picking up multiple jobs, and still can't retire? Why are people working out more, being more active, and still getting sick? Like, and then we just think, well, this is just part of life. This is just part of it. But I could take the same people, the same millions of people going through different things, right? And see what was actually changed in their life, guys. Like, tradition should turn into transition. People should be transitioning more into doing something different, right? I believe in consistency. I believe in doing the same thing for an effect via consistency, because that's just how things get built. However, right, you know, there's just a measure, you know, there got to be a measure of just plausibility to things. Like, how long should we keep doing this, you know, if we're getting the same result? You know, we may have to tweak things a bit. You know, we may have to retract. People think sometimes putting in more time can cause accomplishments, can cause, you know, getting to the next step. But sometimes you have to step back and retract. Sometimes you have to put less money into something. You know, sometimes you have to have less friends. Sometimes you have to take less advice. Like, less is more. I'm telling you guys, it's gonna be, you know, it's gonna be the killer of people's dreams, thoughts, goals, and ambitions if people don't really think about what really that means. You know, change like is inevitable because you get older, right? So unless you have something like a mental problem, you know, unless you've gone through something traumatic, right? You know, like, as you get older, right, you know, from 30 to 40, there's going to be some sort of change about me. That's inevitable because, you know, morbid, like we have mortality, you know, like we're not immortal, right? We change. Like, someone who's 20 is going to be different from someone who's 80, right? That's physical, just common life. Somebody who's 20 or 30 years old can be way ahead of somebody who's 50 or 60. And I'm not just talking about finances. I'm just talking about the overall being, you know, the overall, you know, experience of life, the overall expansion of your mind, man. Like, just being able to adapt to change and make it so common that you could be put in any environment and succeed in any situation and pull through, you know. That is what I want to continue to experience. That's what I talk about with my wife. That's what I want to show my daughter. You know, like, I want to exemplify that change. Going to college is not the end all be all, but if you can do that, if you can get a degree, right, minimize and mitigate, you know, an investment into it, mitigate, you know, some of those negative experiences with maneuvering through different people and maneuvering through the classroom and getting that education. But so if you can do that, you know, mitigate your time to get that, you know, that means to an opportunity, because it's not the end all be all, guys. It's people with PhDs who can't hold a job. So we're changing. The economy and life is changing. This is all over the world. It's not just the States now, right? So, you know, we got to adapt to different things. But if you can mitigate the time and investment to get that part done, get that degree, get that certificate, but still keep your mind open into other directions into picking up a skill, a trade, doing something, right? This is what I'm talking about with not just sticking to I keep wanting to say transition, because that's the word I've substituted now. It's the traditionalized thinking that if I just do what my parents did, if I do what my grandparents do, or if I do what my friend is doing currently, right? If I did what my boss did to get here, I'll get here. It's not gonna be, one, life isn't, objective, right? Life is definitely subjective for one, and it's the game of life, right? There's X's and O's and there's ones and zeros. It's a matrix, and the matrix assumes a role of tradition. That's how we're built in tradition, and the real game of life is how do we maneuver into more of a gray area? You know what I'm saying? Like, how do we maneuver into a more gray area? Like, how do we get ourselves out of this box? Because the more people get themselves out of a box, I won't say the more success that will come, but the more opportunities, because success is dependent on how you use those opportunities, right? It's not like just, okay, someone just drops $1 million in my account, or I just find, right, a couple $1,000s on the ground. If I don't take advantage of it, I won't be successful. There are people who are winning the lottery and becoming broke within 3 to 5 years. That will never make sense to me. However, obviously there's people who get into sports and they get these $1 million contracts, right? People go into the G League now. People are getting NIL deals in college, 18 and 19. I will probably never even see that type of money in my life. And then in 5, 10, 15 years later, these guys is broke. So, it's not, always think of the means, right? You're as successful as both the opportunities you get and how you take advantage of the opportunities. Less is more. So you can't always look for advice. You can't or just always solely depend on advice. You got to go through it a little bit. You got to experience it. You got to research yourself, and you got to change the way of thinking. I can't keep doing the same thing or being in the same environment or being around the same group of people if I want detrimental change. And I'm saying detrimental. I'll say extreme change. I tend to use detrimental, but that's more of a negative connotation. If I want extreme change in my life or fast change, a lot of things have to happen, right? In a first then kind of process. So I really think that's important. Tradition is matrix, guys. Like, there's people leaving me comments. Especially on my family channel. You are living the dream. I am not. My friends, see this video. I wish I could do what you're doing, blah, blah, blah. You can. There's people who make more money than me. There's people who are single, so they have less responsibility. There's people who don't have assets, which means they don't have those liabilities, which means they don't have attachments, which means they don't have to keep investing into things when there's gaps and people providing them income. So when you are free of things and you have something substantial that you can pivot and turn into something residual, you have the opportunity, at least the opportunity. There's people who can do it today. I work with people who make hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, and they can do it. They could have done it 5 to 10 years ago, but it's a mindset. And I'm not talking about people who don't want to do it. These are people who say, I wish, I want to, I can't wait, and you can. It is change. I don't care if I know 10 people in my department who's been here for 20 years. I've always been the one to say, I can't be here for more than 6 to 12 months if I don't see change, if I don't see a pay increase, because it has to match my inflation. I'm talking about working. If I don't see a promotion because I've been busting my ass to do what I'm doing, and I need a promotion, right, because I have a child on the way, and I need a promotion because I need these benefits, you know what I'm saying? Like, so I can't stay in the same realm of thinking or reality that people do if I want change. Tradition, guys, is a matrix. I'm telling you, it's a matrix, and it's not all bad, but you guys have to get to a point, and I am still learning this too. So we all have to get to a point where we're like, okay, how long should we keep doing the same thing or same type of thing? Because sometimes we may have to pivot life altogether and try something totally different, and that's scary. But what's also scary is when you find out that you're 60 or 70 and there's things that you could have done 20, 30, and 40 years ago, and you're like, damn, I just was afraid. I just didn't want to change, or I've let someone talk me out of it. Tradition is a matrix. Success is dependent on the opportunities you get and how you use them. Can't always listen and see what other people do. Try it yourself, take that risk, and maybe life will change.